Hi friends, Father Kerry Walters here, pastor of Holy Spirit American National Catholic Church, and this is another Holy Spirit moment. This one, a Veterans Day celebration of soldiers of Christ. Today is Veterans Day. It's an occasion for the nation to remember and honor those men and women who have served as soldiers in the armed forces. All honor to them. But today is also the feast of St. Martin of Tours. And St. Martin of Tours, a 4th century saint, tells us that there is another way to serve. There is a different kind of soldier than one who takes up a weapon. That kind of a person is what Martin of Tours called a soldier of Christ. And on this Veterans Day in which we honor veterans, it's occurred to me that the story of several of these soldiers of Christ throughout the centuries of Christianity really deserve to be remembered. And I would like to share with you the stories of just 4 of them, one of them being St. Martin of Tours. Martin was born in present-day Hungary. He was a Roman citizen. He was the son of an officer in the imperial army, and it was the custom in those days for the sons of Roman officers to follow in their father's footsteps. It wasn't just a custom, as a matter of fact. It was a conscription. It was a law. Martin had no desire to go into the military, but his hands were tied, and so at the age of 15, he became a Roman soldier. But eventually he found Christ. He began to study, he began to read the Gospels, and he began to recognize that his role as a fighting soldier was incompatible with his devotion to Christ. At one point, he finally decided that he had to take a stand. And he says to his superiors, "I am a soldier of Christ, and I am forbidden to fight." Well, they were furious when they heard this. They just assumed that Martin was a coward and he was using this religious excuse to get out of a battle that was impending. So they threw him in jail and they were going to execute him. But as things turned out, the people against whom the Roman army was going to fight surrendered, and the charges were dropped against Martin, and he was released from prison and from the army. He was, if you will, the first conscientious objector, the first person to, at least according to the records that we have, say, "I am a soldier of Christ, and fighting or killing is forbidden to me." He sets the stage for all soldiers of Christ who come after him. Now, if you will, fast forward 16 centuries. It's World War I. And I'm speaking now of an Anglo-Irish Anglican chaplain by the name of Geoffrey Studdert Kennedy. Studdert Kennedy is actually a hero of mine. I have actually put together a collection of his writings if you are interested in learning more about him. Studdert Kennedy joined the British Expeditionary Forces at the beginning of World War I, and he was absolutely convinced, as were most Britons at the time, that the war was righteous. But he saw action on the front lines, especially on the Meissen Ridge. He realized that the carnage that was taking place was in no way worth any kind of ideological or jingoistic or patriotic goal. He was awarded the Military Cross, showing great bravery under fire, bringing back wounded soldiers from no man's land. After the war, he became a convinced pacifist and spent the rest of his life traveling throughout Britain, encouraging people to try and find other than military ways to resolve the differences between nations. He was beloved by everyone who knew him. In fact, during World War I, he had picked up the nickname of Woodbine Willie, an affectionate nickname given to him by soldiers because he was in the habit of handing out Woodbine cigarettes to them. He exhausted himself after the war, preaching the peace of Christ to everyone who would listen, and he eventually died in 1929 at the relatively early age of 45. Studdert Kennedy was a soldier of Christ, and a soldier of Christ who realized his calling under the most horrendous conditions, battlefield conditions. Another soldier of Christ that I have become an admirer of, and whom I have also written about in a book of mine entitled Profiles in Christian Courage, is an American Catholic priest named Emil Kapaun. Kapaun was born in Kansas. He comes from Czech heritage. He was ordained a priest, and he joined the army. In the end of World War II, he was stationed in Burma as a spiritual guide for the American soldiers there. At the beginning of the Korean War, he re-enlisted in the army because he had been discharged at the end of the Second World War, and he was sent to Korea as a chaplain. In November 1950, the American forces had pushed the Koreans beyond north of the 38th parallel, but they were ambushed when they did that. They had stretched their lines too thin, and an army of around 20,000 Chinese attacked them. Kapaun agreed to stay behind to tend to the wounded as the American forces beat a hasty retreat. And as a consequence, he and a lot of other American soldiers were captured and became prisoners of war. They were sent to a camp in which the conditions were unspeakable. The men were given handfuls of grain, uncooked grain, each day to eat, which amounted to about 300 calories. They had no water to drink unless they ate snow. Disease was rampant. It was bitter, bitter winter, and none of them had clothes that would protect them from the elements. Kapaun spent himself in being a moral inspirer and a spiritual mentor to these men who frequently found themselves close to despair. He was loved by the men whom he nursed and nurtured, both as a fellow soldier and as a chaplain in this POW camp. He would frequently, in Latin, so that the guards wouldn't understand what he was saying, whisper to the men, "Don't let the bastards get you down." Eventually, he became ill and died in May of the following year. He was awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously. He never picked up a gun during his entire time in the military. He was a spiritual guide. He was a soldier of Christ. The final soldier of Christ who I would like to recommend to you today is a person named Charles Liteky. Mr. Litki was a Catholic chaplain again in the Army in Vietnam. And in 1967, he single-handedly managed to rescue 23 GIs who had been ambushed by Viet Cong and were being decimated by machine gun and mortar fire. He managed to drag 23 men out of the kill zone. He nursed those who were wounded, and he gave last rites to those who were dying until everyone could be medevaced out. He too was awarded the Medal of Honor for his heroism. It was the first battle that he had ever been in as a chaplain. And of course, like all military chaplains, he was unarmed. And even if he had been armed, he wouldn't have fired against the Viet Cong because he was a soldier of Christ and was perfectly willing to die rather than kill in order to help other people. Like Studdert Kennedy, Litki became a pacifist after his experience in Vietnam. And in fact, he famously returned his Medal of Honor in protest about U.S. involvement in Central American civil wars under the Reagan administration. Litki was a soldier of Christ. Studdert Kennedy was a soldier of Christ. Martin of Tours was a soldier of Christ. Emil Kapaun was a soldier of Christ. These four men and countless other men and women recognized that they had a higher calling that they had to honor, and that calling was to the Prince of Peace. If they served in the military, they did so in order to minister to soldiers, not to kill other people. Our word soldier is etymologically related to the Latin word solidus. And solidus refers to a coin that's heavy. And as a matter of fact, one of the gold coins in the Roman Empire was called a solidus. I think a soldier of Christ is precisely a person who is heavy with the golden faith that enables him or her to minister to people who are in distress, to love enemies, to not fire upon others in anger. Soldiers of Christ, soldiers of golden faith, heavy with the presence of God. God bless them. God bless them, and God thank them for the example they give to the rest of us on this Veterans Day. I'm Father Kerry Walters, and this has been another Holy Spirit moment. God bless all of you. I'll see you again soon. Take care.